It is full dark at a night perimeter somewhere in the central highlands of Vietnam, 1968, and a new man, 2 weeks in country, reaches down and starts to unlace his boots. His feet have been begging him for hours. Before the first knot comes loose, a hand closes around his wrist. It belongs to the rifleman lying next to him, a man with 8 months in the bush, and he doesn't say a word. He just shakes his head once and lets go. The new man doesn't understand yet. By morning, after what happens at 3 a.m., he will. And for the rest of his tour out in the bush, his boots will stay exactly where they are, on his feet, all night, every night. This is the file on why so many grunts in Vietnam went days, sometimes weeks, without ever taking off their boots. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going inside one of the strangest disciplines of the infantryman's war. The 4 reasons the boots stayed on in the bush, the 3 a.m. Arithmetic that made barefoot the most dangerous thing a man could be. The creatures that moved into any boot foolish enough to be left empty overnight. And the terrible bill the feet eventually paid for all of it, because this file completes a story this channel has been telling across 3 videos, and the ending isn't free. If files like this are why you're here, a like and a subscribe take 1 second and genuinely help. First, let's be precise. Because the men who lived this are precise, and this channel owes them the same. This is a story about the bush, about combat operations, contested ground, the nights when the enemy owned the darkness 10 meters past your perimeter. Back at a base camp or a big fire base, behind wire and bunkers, a man could take his boots off, and did. And, as viewers of our file on socks know, the disciplined ones used every safe hour they could find to dry their ruined feet, because that ritual was the only medicine that worked. That was the rule when the ground allowed it. But on operations, out where contact could come at any second, which for a line infantryman was most of his tour, a different rule applied, passed from veteran to new guy, exactly like the hand on the wrist. Out here, the boots stay on. Veterans remember stretches of a week, 2 weeks, an entire operation, without their boots leaving their feet. The title of this file is how they themselves tell it. So, why? Why would a man whose feet were rotting inside his boots, and they were, we'll get to that, refuse the simple relief of taking them off for the night? Because of what the night was. Reason 1, the 3 a.m. problem. In Vietnam, the perimeter at night was not a place where men slept in any civilian sense. It was a place where men waited in shifts for the sound. The enemy, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army, moved at night, probed at night, attacked at night. Darkness was their air cover. Standard practice in the field had every man awake and ready at the edges of darkness. The stand-to at dusk, and again before dawn, the hours when attacks favored the attacker. And between those, a rotation of watches where a third or half the perimeter stayed on the guns while the rest lay down in their gear. Not undressed, not unbooted, down in the dirt, rifle in reach, ready. Understand what going to sleep even meant out there, because the word barely applies. Settling a night defensive position was a combat operation in itself, run in the last usable light. Positions assigned, so every rifle had its sector and every sector interlocked. The claymore mines carried all day now clacked open and staked out facing the likely approaches, firing wires running back to the men who would squeeze them, trip flares strung in the grass beyond, so that anything crawling toward the perimeter would have to buy its approach with light. Then the watch order. Who's up first? Who's up at midnight? Who has the worst shift? The 3 to 5? when the body begs hardest and the enemy knows it. Only after all of that did a man lie down, and what he did was not undressing. It was docking, rifle located by feel, grenades located by feel, boots on, everything on, body lowered into the dirt like a machine parked in gear. Sleep in the bush was a technical state. It meant temporarily unconscious, fully dressed for the fight, 60 seconds from being a rifleman again. The boots weren't an oversight in that system. They were the system. Now run the arithmetic of an attack. When a perimeter erupts at 3 in the morning, and it erupted at 3 in the morning for thousands of American perimeters across that war, the fight is often decided in the first 60 seconds. Who is returning fire? Who is at his position? Who is feeding the machine gun? A man who has to find his boots in the dark, shake them out, pull them onto swollen feet, and lace them, under fire, hands shaking, tracers overhead, is not a rifleman for the first 2 minutes of the fight. He is a casualty who hasn't been hit yet. Barefoot was not an option either, and that's reason 2. But the plain math came first. The boots stayed on because the war refused to schedule its emergencies. Reason 2, the ground itself. Say a man ignored all that, kicked his boots off, and the perimeter blew up anyway. Could he not just fight barefoot? 60 seconds barefoot on the floor of a Vietnamese jungle at night would answer the question for life. The ground the war was fought on was, without exaggeration, one of the most hostile surfaces on earth. Thorn vine and split bamboo, rock and root, the debris of shattered trees after every contact, and the things that lived down there. Vietnam's jungles carried snakes in real variety, including cobras and kraits the men learned to leave alone, scorpions and giant tropical centipedes, long as a hand, armored, and carrying a sting men described as unforgettable. Add the enemy's contribution, the punji stake, sharpened bamboo, planted exactly where a careless foot might land. The jungle boot, the canvas and leather machine we covered in the socks file, was the only interface a man had between his body and all of it. Take it off at night, and you were, in the most literal sense, out of contact with the only ground you could survive standing on. Reason 3, the feet themselves. And this is the one nobody sees coming. After days of wet marching under a combat load, feet do not stay the same size, they swell. Skin softens and spreads, tissue fills with fluid, and the boot that came off at midnight, pulled from feet that have been working and soaking for 3 days, has a real chance of not going back on at dawn, or going back on only through pain that makes a man useless. Veterans of long operations describe exactly this fear. The boot, once surrendered, might not be recoverable, and a man in the bush who cannot boot up is not a walking soldier, he's a medevac request. So men made a grim, physiological bet. Better to leave the swollen foot sealed in its boot, where at least it still worked, than to gamble on getting it back inside tomorrow. The boot had become load-bearing structure. You don't remove structure in the middle of the storm. And now add the monsoon, because the picture isn't complete until it's raining. For months of the year, in whole regions of that country, the rain simply did not stop, and the perimeter routine ran anyway. Picture the version of that night where the man lies down in a shallow depression that is actively becoming a puddle. Poncho pulled over himself and his rifle, rain drumming on it for 6 straight hours, boots full of the day's paddy water, socks, if he still wore any, and our earlier file explains why many didn't, long since fused to his skin. He is not sleeping in boots the way a hunter naps in a deer stand. He is lying in warm water, in the dark, in leech country, fully dressed, listening through rain noise for sounds that want him dead, and doing arithmetic about which discomfort is survivable. Men came out of a week of that with their feet looking, in the words the veterans themselves keep using, like something that had drowned. And they still didn't take the boots off. That's not stubbornness. That's how convincing the 3 a.m. math was. And reason 4, the quiet one underneath the other 3, speed was survival everywhere, not just in the perimeter fight. Night moves, sudden extractions, the order whispered down the line at 4 a.m. to be somewhere else now. The bush war ran on a clock measured in seconds, and every second of it assumed a man's feet were already dressed for it. Now, the boot that did come off, because here's the detail that proves how alive that ground really was, and every tropical soldier in every army knows it. On the nights and mornings when a man did get his boots off, at the fire base, in the rear, on the safe perimeter our Sox file described, the empty boot standing beside him did not stay empty. A boot is warm, dark, and sheltered. To the small fauna of Vietnam, it is prime real estate. Scorpions moved in, centipedes moved in, spiders moved in, and so was born one of the most universal rituals of jungle soldiering, practiced across armies and across wars. Before your foot goes in, the boot comes up, turns over, and gets banged and shaken. Every time, no exceptions, no matter how tired you are. Men learned it once, the easy way or the hard way, and did it for the rest of their tours. Some will tell you they still do it today, 50 years later, with slippers in Ohio. Even taking your boots off in Vietnam created a new danger. The country simply did not offer a move without a counter-move. Put yourself in the new man's position for one night, because this is where the whole file becomes a single decision. It's 10 p.m. in a night defensive position on contested ground. You have been walking since dawn. Your feet inside those boots have passed through pain into something like static, hot, soaked, screaming to be let out. 10 meters away, the man with 8 months in country is already down for his rest window. Boots on, laces still tied, rifle lying against his chest like a sleeping child. Every cell in your feet is telling you he's crazy. You reach for your laces. His hand finds your wrist in the dark. That's the scene we opened with, and it happened, in one form or another, 10,000 times in that war, the lesson passing from tour to tour without a word. And then it's 3 a.m., and the tree line flashes, and the perimeter is awake and firing inside of 5 seconds. And the veteran is at his position in exactly the time it took him to roll over. You are still on your back, holding one boot, learning the arithmetic. If the night is kind, you get to be embarrassed instead of dead. Either way, you never touch your laces in the bush again. But the war always collected its bill. And this is where tonight's file joins the two before it. Boots that never come off mean feet that never dry. Feet that never dry, as we showed in the Sox file, Maserati. The skin goes soft, white, and broken. And broken, wet skin in that country meant immersion foot, jungle rot, infection. The whole rotten catalog this channel has now traced across the underwear, the socks, and tonight, the boots. The Army's own medical history of the war, Alfred Allen's official monograph on skin disease in Vietnam, records what that arithmetic did at scale. During wet season operations, rotting skin at times pulled more infantrymen off the line than the enemy did, and commanders in the worst country, like the Delta, learned to plan operations around how long their men's feet could survive them. The system did try to fight back. This is the doctrine versus war collision our socks file opened, playing out at the level of the boot. Medics and platoon sergeants pushed foot care at every halt that allowed it. Accounts describe daytime rest stops, where men were rotated through drying their feet, a few at a time, never the whole line at once, so the perimeter never went soft. And leaders in the wettest country treating feet as a command responsibility, the same lesson the First World War had carved into every army with its trench foot hospitals and its officers ordered to inspect their men's feet daily. The intent never went away. The opportunity did. A rest halt in secure country was one thing, a night on contested ground was another, and the war handed out far more of the second kind. Doctrine said dry them, the bush said later. And later, on a line infantryman's tour, had a way of meaning weeks. Hold both truths at once because the grunt had to. Taking your boots off in the bush could get you killed tonight. Leaving them on was slowly wrecking you for next month. There was no right answer. There was only the war, offering its usual menu of 2 bad options, and the men chose tonight over next month every time, because you have to survive tonight to have a next month. That's the real story under this file's title, and it's why the title isn't really an exaggeration, even though a fire-based shower call existed. In the place where it counted, on the ground where the war actually happened, the boots stayed on until the operation ended. And the men, being the men this channel keeps finding, turned even that into discipline. Dry your feet when the ground allows it. Boots on when it doesn't. Shake them out, always. Do the math at 3 a.m. before 3 a.m. does it for you? So picture them one last time. A perimeter full of exhausted teenagers in the dark, every one of them lying in full uniform on the worst ground on earth, boots laced, rifles in reach, paying for tomorrow's feat with tonight's readiness, because that was the price, and they knew it. And picture the new man from the top of this file, a year later, with his own 8 months in the bush behind him, closing his own hand around some newer kid's wrist in the dark and shaking his head, once passing the lesson on the way it came to him, without a single word. The Army issued the boots. The war decided they'd never come off. If you were there, the comments below are the record now, and tonight's question is one every grunt can answer without checking a diary. How long was your longest stretch without taking your boots off? And what did your feet look like when they finally came out? The men reading include the ones who were lying next to you, and the best story down there has a real chance of becoming a future file. It's happened on this channel before. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. If this file was worth your time, leave a like. It genuinely pushes these stories in front of more people, and share it with someone who thinks sleeping in your boots is just a figure of speech. For more of what they didn't put in the textbooks, subscribe. The files keep coming. To the men who lay down every night, dressed for a fight they hoped wouldn't come, and got up every morning, still ready, this one was for you.